Welcome back everyone. The theme of the week has been 2000s cars, and the trial event consists of circuit races and front-wheel drive vehicles. There are at least 10 cars you can use for this challenge, and I've opted to build 4 of them today. What you're looking at right now is an Integra on sport tires. While this build was originally intended for use on the C1 Loop, this power level, tire compound, and suspension setup should help illustrate what a typical lap time looks like in a car with a reasonable amount of power. Both of the featured tracks have a good mix of straights, tight radius corners, and sweepers, and while the street tire Integra looks competent, this is the slowest car you'll see here today. I've built 4 cars, some with forced induction and some without, all on stock tires. The vehicles on display won't be easy to drive, but they will be competitive. In these front-wheel drive cars, there's no masking poor corner exit behavior. Having enough patience to wait for the car to finish rotating is crucial to putting down a good lap time, especially in cars with twice the horsepower they left the factory with. In addition to the sport tires, this Integra has been resprayed in supersonic blue, a color that was only available for 2 years on the 2-door Integra. Let me know what your favorite JDM factory paint color is down below. We're now rounding one of the last corners, and this is one of the most tricky parts of driving a high-powered front-wheel drive car, keeping the momentum high without pushing wide. The driving line is deceptively tricky for front-drive cars on tracks like this. I pulled a few more laps and ended up with a baseline of 140.7. I decided to run the trial in the Integra as a baseline, just to see what it would do. And compared to last week's trial, the AI kind of seemed like a pushover. It seemed like I was paired with other players that weren't in competitive cars. I had a much easier time getting through this championship than I anticipated originally. You can tell through this section that even though my car's on sport tires, I'm definitely at a power advantage. That Forza Aero that most of the AI cars come with is definitely a detriment, especially in situations like this. I like how you can see how much ground I've put in between me and everybody else here. It's very interesting. Not all of the trials ended up looking like this. This was a very unbalanced championship. The second race started out a little bit more competitive, but not by much. It almost feels like I'm fighting with my own teammates just as much as I'm fighting with the AI competitors. Definitely not in excess of competent driving here. This purple car was definitely an interesting subject. Nonetheless, we got through this championship and got on our way. The first build we'll be running through is the Ford Focus RS. This was kind of a special car when it came out. It was limited to 4,500 units, and it was a European market only car. It left the factory with high quality performance parts, such as Sachs dampers, Oz wheels, a performance diff, Brembo brakes, and Sparco interior bits. Additionally, it only came in one color, metallic blue. On this example, I've tried to replicate mean green metallic. This is a factory color on newer Focus STs. This Focus comes factory equipped with a turbo. To maximize PI cost, I tried to limit the turbo upgrade as that disproportionately adds points on. In retrospect, putting on stickier tires or removing weight would have made the car faster. We were not able to use all 450 horsepower. When ordering the roster of vehicles, I arranged them based on order of anticipated lap time. My predictions ended up being fully correct, and this was the slowest car of the bunch, though not by much. This is due to both the factory turbocharger and the poor handling dynamics caused by the poor weight distribution and the lack of tire grip. My default setup for these cars consisted of 1.5 degrees in front and 1.2 degrees of rear camber, leaving springs close to stock, and setting 610 for bump and rebound stiffness on the dampers. After some tweaks, the dampers in particular were extremely aggressive on these cars, to the point that I had to dial them back for being too bouncy. While lowering the number on the dampers may add grip, it also makes the car more unstable. The first go around with the Focus was extremely understeer prone. not unexpected for a front drive car with 450 horsepower. Through trial and error, I added a bit of spring rate, raised the front camber to 2 degrees, softened the front dampers to the extreme, and firmed up the rear to mitigate understeer as much as possible. You can see how unstable the car is through the faster sections of the track, and that's part of the trade-off of using soft front suspension. Going into braking zones tended to be a hassle with this setup. Neither of the two tracks were big enough to let the car use its available power, and the lap time reflects that. It gets a 10 out of 10 for theatrics though. The Focus achieved a very respectable time that shaved off half a second from the baseline Integra. We'll now shift our focus to the 7th gen Toyota Celica build. This iteration of the Celica was produced as a front-wheel drive only sport compact. The high-performance iteration had an engine that was re-engineered by Yamaha, along with special factory ground effects and suspension upgrades. I learned from the mistakes made with the Focus, and here we'll take some of the weight out and use a non-turbocharged power plant, in this case a racing V6. Sourced from the Toyota T100 Baja race truck. One issue that I wasn't anticipating was the gear ratios. Even with the sport trans fully maxed to the acceleration side, the gearing was too long overall. Somewhere between 135 and 150 was the sweet spot for this event. Another thing that further complicated the tuning process was the rear wing. While it allows for almost 10 extra PI points worth of power, it does add downforce to the wrong end of the car, resulting in even more understeer to tune out. The car felt more nimble than the Focus off the baseline tune, but there was still plenty of mid-corner grip to be found. As with the other cars here, the caster was turned up to allow for better contact patch during the faster corners. Though it didn't feel or look as fast as the Focus, the Celica's overall improvements allowed it to run a 139.5 on the Legends track, making it nearly a second faster than the Ford. The second fastest vehicle put together for this trial event was the 08 Honda Civic FD2 Type R. This vehicle is different from the others, residing in the Retro Saloons class. To compete with the other vehicles in that class, Playground Games has given the option of installing extremely wide tires on the vehicle. While tempting, I opted to install 245s on the front and 265s on the back, as putting anything wider than that on the front would not allow us to maximize the power on the build. I was surprised to see that I was not able to install a centrifugal supercharger on the factory engine for this vehicle. I left this build naturally aspirated, kept the body panels and rear wing stock, pulled some weight out, and as the vehicle was engineered on a newer platform than most of the other available cars, I did not add any chassis stiffening. Even with the mild tire sizing, we were only able to squeeze out 330 horsepower out of this build, though it would prove to be enough to best the Celica and the Focus. Unlike the Celica, I was able to dial in the final drive, having to lengthen it after bouncing off of the rev limiter on some of the early test runs. After putting together the other builds, I quickly opted to max out the caster and set the springs to about 20% in the front and 40% in the rear. I would have preferred more overall stiffness, but the high-speed sweepers and slow corner exits out of the hairpins on the first track made this unfavorable. Keeping the front soft allows for better launches in the slow stuff and better manners above 100 miles an hour. In the end, the damping settings still looked wild, but they were not as aggressive as on the Focus. Front bump was set to 4, front rebound at 6, rear bump at 8, rear rebound at 15. The reason rear rebound is so high is to make sure that the front of the car is in control during heavy braking, something made more difficult with the staggered tire setup, skinnier tires on the front than the back. This is not a setup that is realistic. Historically, most front-wheel drive builds use a square setup with all 4 wheels and tires having identical sizing, although in recent years reverse staggered setups have become more common, especially on autocross setups. The Civic put down an impressive time, but I knew the Integra would be faster. This car, in all forms, is known for cheating the PI system. With a fair amount of overhead from stock, along with the centrifugal supercharger bolted on, there was no doubt in my mind that it would be the fastest car here, possibly by entire seconds. After all the upgrades, the car was nearly 300 pounds heavier, but had nearly 500 horsepower being routed to the front wheels. All that power is being sent through a tight 5-speed gearbox and forced down to the ground through 245 width front tires. We raised the rear and lowered the front, and adjusted the dampers to match the Celica setup. We actually lowered the front stiffness even more, but it was ultimately dialed back for the finalized tune to keep the ride from being too bouncy. I was now paired against a Ghost that felt impossible to beat on the Rivals event. The Integra stepped up and proved it was top dog, setting a time of 1:37.46. This was faster than the Civic by nearly a second and a half, and faster than the baseline Sport Tire tune by more than 3 entire seconds. This is impressively fast, and with more track time and tuning, this could be further improved. The first auxiliary event is hardly worth mentioning. Most of you will likely own a competent rally car that meets the class and year requirement. That being said, this is one of very few events that snow tires may be worth installing on your vehicle. We did just that on this early 2000s WRX, along with throwing away the factory engine and replacing it with a Porsche Source Flat 4, if only to add the centrifugal supercharger to the mix. Low tire pressure, soft sway bars all around, and a diff set up more conservatively than most road builds round off the tuning for this event. The snow tires and engine conversion made this event a cakewalk, although this could have been completed in most stock vehicles eligible for the event. Retro Rewind accidentally synthesized the most surprising build of the week. The retro sports cars class is fairly arbitrary and has a few outlier cars that don't fit in with more conventional classes. Somehow, the DeLorean DMC-12, BMW 850, Subaru SVX, Lotus Elise, and Toyota AE86 all fall into this category, along with most of the cars you'd probably associate with the Fast and Furious franchise, as well as a Forza Edition Miata with 1,000 horsepower. As you can see, I've decided to give the Celica a second chance to redeem itself after putting up competent but mediocre lap times on the Legend circuit. Before anything else, the Wave Runner paint had to go. The car that was pieced together felt oddly reminiscent of Christian Rado's Scion TC, a vehicle built for the sole purpose of beating time attack records, and especially the version with the giant front wing. This car does not share the Scion's grip characteristics or handling prowess, but it does share an excessive amount of power being driven to the front wheels only. The racing V6 was reused, this time with twin turbos, and the car was given a 10-speed transmission to manipulate the PI system and keep the car in the power band on long straights. This is a street racing event with long sections of straight road, meaning that the Celica's lack of grip would be a secondary concern. Tire pressure was kept reasonable at 28 and 29 pounds of pressure, a medium amount of front camber with high caster was utilized again, and the dampers, set at 3.6 and 4.5/8.5, gave the car more stability than the version built for the track. We should have had fierce competition from the other players on our team. A TVR in front of us, with multiple NSXs to our right, should keep us on our toes in both the straights and the corners. The blue NSX and the TVR both get a decent launch. I give the TVR a boost a few times, but by the third corner he moves out of our way. Apparently he didn't want the bump draft. I have my sights set on the blue NSX, but it doesn't take long before we catch up. It almost felt like once we hit triple digits, the Celica finally starts to stretch its legs, and the NSX quickly becomes a spectator in our exhibition of horsepower. Through the chicane, the 10-speed keeps the car happy and boosted up, nearly losing sight of the other competitors on the GPS. We brake early, sending the car into a controlled slide through the braking point before matting the gas out of the turn. Once the car grips up, we see the NSX disappear from our minimap once again as we approach another tight section. While hitting the brakes and trying to settle the car, traffic approaches, nearly taking us out. We escape a mess, and after a few more gentle corners, we enter the midpoint of the race as we merge onto the highway. If the NSX couldn't keep up with us before, it surely doesn't have the power to now. Even the slightest of turns can unsettle a car at 300 km per hour, but the trial wing keeps things fairly composed while the front wheels skitter across the cold pavement. By the final straight, we hit 200 miles an hour and gap everyone else badly enough to make everyone think we're cheating. We have to make sure it's not a fluke. The car launches poorly as it always has, and S15 Silvia is slowly pulling away until our car starts to grip up. By the time we're past the first corner, we've gapped everyone again. At this point, we're piloting the car a little on the conservative side, making sure not to run the car off into the snow on corner exit. The car stays composed despite my best efforts to do a burnout through 4th gear. Taking some of the guardrail with us, and with the help of a little traffic, the NSX catches up and takes a better line to get ahead of us. Uphill, the car has no chance of hooking up, so it's a matter of following the Honda and waiting for the right time to make a move. That move didn't take very long. We nearly get clipped by a Subaru WRX in the braking zone, but we made it out of that section, looking forward to a long straight after a tight right-hander. After hitting 185 miles an hour, we have to throw out the anchor, and while the car goes wide off the line, we don't leave the pavement or unsettle the car. At this point, the race has already been won. If you're still watching, I want to thank you for sticking around for another week of Test and Tune goodness. If you haven't already commented, let me know what your favorite Japanese car's paint color is, and we'll see if we can make it work on one of next week's builds. Until then, take it easy, and hopefully we'll see you again soon.